Xtend and Accelerate, they're based on the Masters of Professional Practice. And it's useful to start at the end and think about what does it take to be a person with a Masters. So a person with a Masters has got a higher level of critical thinking, creative, rigorous, all those sorts of words. Traditionally done in a Masters is that people get taken away from their work, put in a padded room in a research lab or something, and then they work for a couple of years and write a book, a thesis. And kind of weirdly, the examiners are then looking at that book to decide, did the person that wrote this meet these criteria of what a Masters person looks like? But kind of more weirdly is that the way that we traditionally, they're taught to do that, we teach them to write like a robot. They write in third person. And it's not about the person, but it's about this study that they're doing. So the examiners are looking at this book that may or may not have been written by a robot to decide if the person that may or may not be a robot meets these criteria. And so what we do is we turn that on its head and say, actually, it's about the person. What we're trying to do is to look at this person at the end of the process and say, does this person meet the criteria of being a Masters, having a Masters? Critical, creative, rigorous, all those things. Because we can't look inside their heads to see if they do that, we want them to articulate what that means. So they articulate that as their professional framework of practice. And so we can then look at that and say, does that meet these criteria? Tick. So this endpoint, the professional framework of practice, if you can see that as, it's like the second line on the CV. You know, after your name, what does it say then? What do you want to be described as? So it starts with a review of what you are now, who you are now, what's got you to where you are now in terms of your work processes, your professional practice, and even stuff like your personal values and things. How do they come into it? The course one is that review of learning. So the whole process is about that development from who you are now to where you want to be. Course two sits in the middle, and course two is about articulating this goal, this where do you want to be in terms of that professional framework of practice. And so over on the other side over here, we've got the work goals. The key thing is that meets your sort of professional goals personally, and it aligns with the direction that the business is trying to take. And then what you're essentially doing is carrying on doing what you would be doing sort of operationally anyway, but doing that with a view to making that particular change. Now, this is probably going to be what we refer to as an action research cycle. So there'll be several iterations that we go around. We don't want to specify right at the start exactly how it's going to play out, because we don't know how it's going to play out. It could be that you think, right, okay, so what we need to do is we'll introduce some tools. And it could go fabulously. And then we say, well, that was good, let's introduce some more tools. Or maybe we even go a bit bolder and introduce, let's try and step that up. Or it could be that you introduce a tool and it's a complete failure, and then we'll look at it and say, what are we going to do about that? How do we do that? So the key is that between these two steps, between these two sides, is we're reflecting on this process. So every week or so, you're keeping some sort of diary, a video diary, or a diary, or drawing on whiteboards, whatever it is, to sort of like capture what's going on in that process. The whole pathway, the thing that adds up to the thesis, because there still is a thesis, and it's what we refer to it as a practitioner thesis. And the clue is that the practitioner thesis comes from this line, from that professional development line, not from the stuff that's coming out of here. So you're not writing up this change as such, you're writing up how you've changed, and that the development and understanding of what it means. That's very much informed by what's going on over here, but this is the crucial stuff. That's how we're dealing with it, particularly with the fact that IT is so changeable. Do we know what we're going to be working on in 18 months' time? Not a chance. But we do know that we're trying to develop an organisation that can think in this way, or we're trying to introduce more testing, or we're trying to introduce a whole new security policies, or whatever else it might be. The notion of the thesis, the root of the word thesis, is about a defendable argument. So your defendable argument is this is my professional framework of practice. In course 2 is where we're also setting up the structures in terms of the academic and professional mentoring, considering the ethics and things around it. There's some interesting ethical dilemmas in this sort of work, which we don't see as a barrier or as a hurdle. We actually see as part of the increasingly rich professional relationships that you're having, which are actually a really good way of describing what's going on in terms of the, why you're doing a master's. It's to lift your thinking and to lift your professional standing. This is a practitioner research canvas. If you know the business model canvas, the idea is the business on a single page, and it's a useful step that people use in sort of start-up business entrepreneurial type support to, if it was a business, you'd be completing it every month or every 6 weeks or something, just to keep refreshing, where am I in this process? The first meeting that we have with people in terms of getting them on the line with us is, let's just have a go at making this up. If we're forced to write something down, let's put something on this, because then it gives us an idea of where we're heading. And we're not wedded to that, but at least it's sort of saying, well, okay, we're not finding out halfway through the project that what you really wanted to be was an astronaut. So you can see that on the left-hand side there, the current professional framework of practice, that's the review of learning. The literature review, which is the context for that. So even if we haven't got actual literature at the moment, it's, well, what's the background to this sort of work? What have we read already that sort of like positions that? Who have we talked to already about positioning that? Communities of practice, the professional networks, who are we connected to? Who can we turn to in terms of support? Who are we trying to influence in that sort of structure? And then the motivation is about the what change you want to make. Then in the middle there we've got the aspiration. That's the professional framework of practice. Where do we want to go? I want to become what are you going to describe yourself as when you finish this? What's the goal for that? And then related to that is the aspiration, the organisational aspiration. And right from the start, we want to see that those two things align. What we want to see is that the organisational benefit comes from the start. Doing it is the organisational benefit, and then they get a super employee at the end with that change in place. So it's a double benefit to the organisation that we can get those two things aligned. The research design is dependent on what it is you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to convince a manager that this is a good idea, then what is the information they're going to require to do that? If you're trying to convince somebody to invest in this process, they're going to require a different set of information. The research design stems from what is the required level of evidence for the change that you're trying to make. When we get to the end, the practitioner thesis, we can kind of consider in terms of a rainbow. The bottom of it is the artefacts, the things that you've done. And those need to be done to the appropriate professional level. Around that, you do a critical review of that process. So this is how that happened. And then around that, you do and this is the professional practice change that stemmed from that. Related to the research design is the ethics and sustainability and moral considerations that we need to align with that, just to make sure that we're being enabling and diverse and so on. And then this V-shaped thing in the middle is essentially the course 3, the doing process. Spinning out to one side is the reflection that's building up that sort of story of the narrative of here is me learning, and spinning out the other side are the artefacts. And then this is the practitioner framework, at the bottom here, the practitioner framework articulated. So that is the thing at the top. As we're building to that, as we're capturing little bits and pieces to that, today I learnt that, I don't work well under stress. It might be the particular thing that we're capturing there. And similarly, capturing the business or organisational change that we're making. It could be that you write down that Bob came and said today that he thought the idea was stupid, but now he really loves it. So it's trying to capture that stuff as we're going along. And then the last box is the skill set. So let's say that we say in the research design that we really do need statistics. Then we need to capture, as we go through, that somehow we're going to have to find that statistical knowledge, or it might be that you need that you think it's going to be a good idea. You're going to get all your colleagues to do the Myers-Briggs. Well, we're going to need to find out how we're going to do that. So this is something that we use right from the start. It's entirely about you. It's entirely about where do you want to be, where does the business want you to be in 18 months' time. Let's make that happen.